We are just about a month away from the NFL draft. First day will be on April 25th. Todd McShay joins us again. He's been joining us throughout the college football, pro football season and kind of leading up to the draft as well. All right. I know you have an updated mock. I don't want to run through the 10 because we've done it a few times already, but you do have a significant change in your mock, and it has to do with the fourth quarterback. So just share with us what you have, and I'll just throw this in there too. Is this just what you're projecting, or is this based on intel?
It's based off of years of experience, I guess, for starters. Secondly, Minnesota doesn't make the trade that it made with Houston and trying to get more first round draft capital. If they didn't, not only if they're, everyone's like, well, they're going to, now they have the capital to try to move up. You don't make that deal if you haven't had significant conversations with teams that are somewhere, let's say, in the top 5. The way I look at it, Chicago's picking at 1. We all know that they're going to take Caleb Williams there. Washington at 2, I believe it's going to be Jaden Daniels coming out of LSU. New England at 3, very likely to take a quarterback. Some people think they could trade out of that spot. I don't personally think they will at this point from what I'm hearing. I think they stay at number 3 and take Drake May is the most likely candidate, even though I think he needs to sit a year. Then you get into that 4 and 5 spot with Arizona and the Chargers, right? And the reason I identify those two is because it's ahead of number 6 with the Giants, right? And I know that the Giants, with Daniel Jones, they have a quarterback that they've invested in, but is he the long-term answer? I've never thought he is. And so while you'd like to hope that he bounces back, but history tells you the turnovers and the injuries, if you're picking at 6, you hope you're never picking that high again. So to me, you had to have had conversations that basically like, what do you need in order to move out of that spot down to 11 with Arizona at 4 and the Chargers at 5? And so I'm not saying a deal is done, but it's pretty damn close is my guess. And it won't shock me before the draft if we see Minnesota packaging those 2 picks and an additional pick maybe this year and likely like a second or third round pick next year, maybe a second round pick next year to go and move up to number 4 or to number 5 with the Chargers.
Right. So in the deal with Vikings and the Texans, basically the Vikings get the 23rd and they get a 7th. And then the Texans get back a good second rounder, which is 42 overall, a 6th rounder, and then the second round pick in 25. So they wouldn't.
That's a hell of a lot of draft capital, man. You don't do that unless you feel strongly you can move in the top 5. And the other part of the equation, right, Ryan? Like, in basketball, like you're only making that deal and giving away a lot this year and next year. If A, you feel like you've locked in a spot at either number 4 or number 5 to go up and get the guy you want, and B, no matter who the quarterback is available as the number 4 quarterback, you love him. And so you have to assume that they really believe in JJ McCarthy, right? Coming out of Michigan.
That's what I would push back on. Like, okay, because I saw your tweets when it happened. When the deal happens, it's like, oh, wait, like this seems to be very specific, but it's part 1. And do they already know that part 2 is there? And people have theorized that part 2 is moving up. So that says in your mock, in this scenario, they have to get to 4, right?
Right.
Why are
4
you doing
or potentially 5 if you had conversations with Arizona and they've insinuated strongly, hey, we're going to stay home and take a receiver. So we don't want to move back that far, but we're not going to take a player that you want it for.
Okay, I have a follow-up on that, first of all, but I'm going to wait. It seems like a lot for J.J. McCarthy, is my point.
I agree. And I like J.J. And I've said, you and I have talked about it going back to September. I think J.J. McCarthy has a chance to be a better pro. I think he understands processing. I think he sees things quickly. I think he's advanced for only 28 starts. Advance in terms of what he's been asked to do at the line of scrimmage, what he's been asked to handle in that offense. I think in terms of throwing off schedule, he does it a lot better than people think. I think there's a little bit of inconsistency there. I think there's some question marks too. I mean, I don't think I know based off of studying tape and just seeing the big picture. But then also this is the time of year I start to have conversation with guys in the league and to a T, everyone says the same thing. Like, Jaden Daniels had the best receiving core to throw to of this group and had weapons all around him. But when you talk about like what was asked of McCarthy, you think about back to that Penn State game, they run the ball the entire second half. When you have a defense like that and you have an offensive line like that, he wasn't asked to carry the team a lot like Drake May was at North Carolina and ups and downs there, like Caleb Williams was, with the defense giving up, 40, 50 points a game. So there's a lot of questions with J.J. McCarthy, but just from an evaluation standpoint, you see that growth potential with him. And if you're Minnesota and you look at what you're able to do in the development of quarterbacks, I think that they feel strongly that they can develop a guy like J.J. But there's also a history, too, with, go to Drake May as well. So, listen, maybe the conversations they had were at number 2 with Washington or number 3 with New England. And maybe they think they can get up and get Drake May, okay, or Jaden Daniels for that matter. Maybe they think that they can get up there and get that. But you're probably talking about packaging those first-round picks plus a first-rounder next year to go up into the top 2 or 3 versus maybe 4 or 5 would probably be like a second-rounder next year.
I've got to be certain. I've got to be certain if I'm dipping into the savings account of draft picks.
I agree.
But look, these guys, you've worked with them. Some of them are your friends. And I would say it's the same thing. I said it recently. Like, no one's running a football team thinking they're bad at drafting. No one's ever been like, you know what, I'm just not good at this. So if their evaluation is that JJ is the second best quarterback or the third best quarterback, then they're talking themselves into the price. I just think you get into so much trouble when I think even the best evaluator would have to admit, like, hey, this position has been this hard. Even if I think I have it figured out, there's a really good chance I'm going to be wrong. All of our guys are going to be wrong. And now I'm paying this massive tax on going after something that isn't even the sure thing. Like, you want to trade 3 firsts for Caleb Williams in a couple seconds? I'd be like, all right, I totally get it. Like, I wouldn't even move out of it, because that's the other thing about how mock drafts influence this process. I'll never forget, like, a GM with a team in basketball, we were going over the draft order and rumors and all this stuff. And he was like, if there were no mock drafts, these drafts would play out entirely differently. And I was like, wait, what? I'm like, come on. He's like, no, absolutely. Granted, the guy that's supposed to go number 1 is going to go number 1. But, if you're going to go to your owner and then he's seeing in the mocks that the guy's like listed at 20 or 22 and I take him 7th because I'm like, I actually just like this guy better and I think the mocks are wrong, and I'm zagging on everyone. And when you're wrong with that, then everybody wants you fired. Now, there's times where I'll watch a draft, whether it's basketball or football, and it's like the guy was projected to go 15th and he goes 9th, and people are like, oh my God.
Right.
Like, wait, like, is it really that much of a reach by 5 or 6 spots? But we're so conditioned to think that there's this just consensus order of all these players. So look, that's my thought on JJ and how much it costs. Your point, though, that you made about Minnesota, in theory, like calling in Arizona, which happens. All right. I don't know if there's a relationship there with those specific teams, but I'm not even asking about that. I think the problem from the outside world of like, oh, I could be a GM or I could do all those different things is that you better have the relationships to call in the favors when you need them. So you would agree that clearly there are teams that are going to be cool and they don't really feel like it's giving up any kind of competitive advantage. It's like, hey, look, if you get to 5, you're going to be fine because this is probably what we're doing it for. I can't tell you. I'm not 100% sure. But like, we're not going to mess up your plan. Where if you don't have that relationship, the other GM may relish the moment they get to just fuck with the other team.
What's amazing?
It's all on the, it's all on the table. Go ahead.
It's amazing to me when I talk to scouts and when I talk to general managers, and it's for 2 different reasons. But when I always ask, dating back to when I started in this business, I always ask, to you, what's the most important part of what you do? And you would think it's like the tape study. You've got to understand each position. You got to understand what our team is looking for. And that's one of the criteria for what's most important in your job. But like across the board, if it's not the number 1 listed thing for a person, it's number 2, relationships. When you get to be a general manager, we've like, Moneyball or we've kind of glorified this, like, all right, this guy's a super scout. He can evaluate talent better. I got news for you. Yeah, there are guys that can evaluate talent better, but when you start to rise up and you get to a position of college scouting director, pro personnel director, scouting director of the whole organization. You get there for a reason. You can evaluate. And there are some guys that are a little bit better than others, but like the cream rises to the top. But when you start to get up to like general manager, it's about understanding organization building and having relationships in the league, because those relationships lead to moments like this, lead to other intel, lead to being able to make trades, whether it's draft or player related. So like, it'll be interesting to see what those relationships are like when we find out what Minnesota does and what deal they're able to make. And I got the other news too for everyone is go back after every draft, talk about like the Colts this past year, right? In their draft process. When did they decide which quarterback was going to be atop their board, the guy that they wanted? Well, it was at the combine. And the combine solidified it when they interviewed him and met with him and saw. But like, it's not the on the field stuff. It's by that point, when you're in the quarterback market and you're talking drafting in the top 10, I'd say 80% of the time, by, let's say, late February, early March, who the guy is that you want. You really do. And then maybe it's two guys and then you go to the individual workouts and all that. So my point to that is the Vikings know, hey, Caleb's 1, we're not getting him. But we've got Jaden 2, JJ 3, Drake May 4. But maybe they have Drake May 2, Jaden 3, whatever that order is. They've basically made up their mind at this point, okay? And if there's kind of a tiebreaker, yeah, maybe the rest of the process, the interviews, bringing him into your facility, going out and have private workouts, maybe that can be a tiebreaker. But my point is, you have to have the evaluation first, and then you have to have the conversations. If you're going to make a move that Minnesota has made already to bring in that 23rd pick and say, hey, we're ready to go up and get our guy moving forward. And it's to me, it's so much of like the general manager, Quessy, working with Kevin O'Connell and knowing what Kevin wants. So there's got to be a lot of communication within the organization as well. And Kevin's done a great job developing and improving quarterbacks that he's worked with. So there are things that they're looking for specifically that will fit what Kevin is looking for in a quarterback.
Okay, that was really good because I think you could add to the timeline. Okay, they knew they were going to move on from Cousins. They bring in Darnold on the 1-year stopgap, which means that whoever they draft is going to play this year, even though everybody preaches patience, especially if it's somebody who's less experienced and say Caleb starts or even Jaden starts, who has, I think, north of 50.
55 starts for
right.
Jaden.
Yeah.
Right behind him is Caleb. But then you get like the sub 30 starts. And you saw me tweet, Bucky Brooks had a great article, right?
Right. NFL.com, former player,
NFL.com.
front office. Yep. Great resume.
The history, like the last 20 or so years of drafting quarterbacks. And the two major factors, the takeaways for me were experience from college prospects. And the crazy part is 40% is kind of the hit rate of quarterbacks in terms of first round draft picks and getting a second contract and all that, which, the fact that we're less than 50% at this point with all the money and time that is invested in evaluating quarterbacks is scary. The second part is it's not just the experience coming out of college, because that hit rate dips significantly below 30 starts and even more below 20 starts, okay? But it's also the guys that come into a situation with fewer than 30 starts and are forced to start right away. Very few of them go on to have success, like, somewhere in that like the 20% range. So if you're playing this as a percentages game and you're going to draft a Drake May who's got 26 starts or JJ McCarthy with 28 starts, I'm not saying you absolutely can't start him right away, but history tells you you're better served in terms of long-term success of redshirting him, or at least playing him in a limited role as a rookie and allowing him to sit and learn and understand like Patrick Mahomes did in Kansas City.